Hey guys, Josh here with Bennett Bass Fishing. I'm going to quickly go over why people lose fish and explain what could possibly go wrong. So first things I'm going to start with is number one would be the hook and the barb. So I use super sharp hooks whenever I can. It's a little bit more money. It makes things a lot easier. So a super sharp hook, Gamakatsu's and some other brands, pierce the lip of the fish easier. There's less of a hook set needed, less of a chance that it's gonna come out, okay? And a nice sharp barb, okay? So that's step one, getting that hook in there. Step two is we wanna keep the pressure on that fish and keep the barb in its mouth at a constant pressure at all times. So the way we do that is we use a rod and a line and a reel to do all of that, right? The next step where something can fail basically, so the hook's in the fish's mouth, is the knot. So this is 8-pound monofilament. I don't know if you guys can see that on the camera or not. This is a polymer knot to the hook itself. So with that knot, it's about 98% strength, so I've been told. That reduces the 8 pounds down to, let's say, 7 and something, 7 pounds and whatever it actually equals out to. I haven't done the math. Less than 8. So now you're down less than 8. So if I break off an 8-pound fish, I know why. It's not an exact science because there's some stretch in the line. So now we're gonna work our way back up the line into the rod, okay? So part of the step 3 is the line stretch. So monofilament actually can soak in water up to, I don't know, some percentage basically. It has 20% strength. So I'm pulling basically about a foot right here on the camera, maybe a little bit more, and I can feel a stretch myself. So imagine you're casting out as far as you possibly can from shore or a kayak, or you're basically just drop shotting straight down. All that stretch is gonna add into either setting the hook or how much the fish can run around and do what he wants. So having a little bit of stretch is good, and it's also bad at the same time, okay? So this fish is gonna instantly feel that prick of the hook, or know that something's wrong. He's getting pulled in the opposite direction and he's gonna try to run. So smallmouth bass like to run. They like to sprint away and bulldog down, and they're great fighters, and that's one of the reasons I like to catch them so much. They like to run. One of the great things about having monofilament is there's a little bit of stretch in that line, so I don't have to react as fast when he runs, okay? So that stretches a little bit. The next part of what I'm going to talk about is basically the rod strength, the rod type. So this is an Abu Garcia Mike Iaconelli rod. This is a 70-30, so medium action, I think. So it's 70% backbone, 30% tip. So this basically bends. I can't really show you guys the whole thing on the camera, so this bends really fast. So when that fish tries to run, line's going to stretch. At the same time, the rod tip is going to give. So if I have a really stiff rod, like a 2x4 basically, I have to compensate for what the line stretch can't do. Does that make sense? So my arm's gonna have to move down and put my rod tip in the water and do all sorts of funky things to keep that constant pressure on the fish. Constant pressure, you keep the fish on. If you're doing sorts of things like putting the rod tip up and down and cranking on them, you're probably gonna lose the fish, or you're gonna open up that hole in its mouth so the hook will pop out. The next step is the rod base. The other 70% of this rod in particular is the leverage on the fish. So if you have a smaller rod or a thinner rod, like a medium rod or a light rod, medium light, on a heavy fish, you're not gonna have any leverage. He's gonna do whatever he wants, and he can spring around and try to keep constant pressure on him. It's gonna be a little more difficult. It is possible, I've done it, especially with 8-pound tests, it's a little more difficult. The rod actually does a lot more than you think it does. And it's not more than just casting. So most of this is casting, the rest of it is playing the fish. The next thing is the drag. So I'm gonna loosen up the drag so I can show you guys exactly what that is. So it's kind of like a clutch in a car, for those of you who drive standard or might drive standard. Is that fish is gonna make short runs. He's gonna go bang, bang, bang and kind of push down and try to get into the weeds for you, or try to pull away. So that is the line stretch, the tip of the rod, right? And your arm, anything within like, you know, basically 2 inches all the way up to, let's say, 4 feet that he can run And you can counter-react with your arm or the way that you're moving the rod. So maybe it's, I don't know, 5 or 6 feet, because you can tip the rod all the way down. Constant pressure is the key, remember this? The next thing, if you want to make long runs, so let's say he wants to make a 20-foot run, he's really strong, he's gonna pull drag out. So that's that part right there. The goal for the drag is to make long runs, less than 8 pounds. Got that? So if he pulls, if I have this tension too much, more than an 8-pound pull, my line is going to snap. Simple as that. A smooth drag, like this one, this is a more expensive reel. This is the SX 40 series. I can pull that nice and smooth. There's no chunking movement, there's no nothing. It just pulls nice and smooth. That's the basics, okay? The reel is just to wrap the line back around. So you don't want to reel while the drag is going, because it kind of ruins the line. You're basically putting extra pressure on the line that you don't need to. Let the fish, if you have a nice rod and reel set up, and you have a nice line that's not frayed or anything like that, you're not too worried about it, let the fish do what it's got to do. You can winch them in if you want. Let the rod and the reel and the drag do its work. Do what it's supposed to do, okay? So that is the expensive setup, which I use quite a bit. Gotcha? That's it. So you want to set your drag. Most people don't do this. You can turn all the way down. And basically I've kind of done it by feel. They actually say to use a fish scale to pull on 8 pounds and then turn it down just a little bit. Never actually done that. I'm sure it works great. I don't have time to set every reel all the time for every line that I have on there, okay? So for a cheap rod and reel, which this is probably a $20 rod and maybe a $20 reel. It has a couple bearings in it, which makes the reel smooth, along with the drag material, drag disc. They make carbon fiber ones, all sorts of things for high-speed pulls. You can do the same thing. My very first bass tournament was actually with this rod. It is super light. So this is basically a trout rod that I didn't know any better at the time. This is a medium light, 6 foot. And it bends super easy. So I just even like going like that. It's kind of a noodle stick. I use it for perch now, basically, or panfish. I had no control over fish at all. The bass would just do its thing and the rod would just bend right in half. Look at that. That's within, you know, 1.5 feet of each other. And with not a lot of effort, right? I got 2 fingers on it. The line is the same, it's still 8-pound line. The drag is garbage, okay? So the drag is cheap. Because there's less bearings, the drag is gonna wobble around a little bit because the way that it's designed, so it's not smooth. Now if I'm pulling at a constant rate, basically, hear that. The fish is gonna pull faster than that, and that's gonna create tension on the line, less tension. Tension on the line, less tension. And that's what you don't wanna do. You wanna keep constant tension on the fish at all times, okay? That's why you guys lose big fish. Let me know if you have any questions. Cheap reels and cheap rods do work. Tournament fishing I wouldn't recommend. If you're gonna go with a cheap rod and cheap reel, buy something that's a little bit flimsier, a little bit faster, so you can counteract that fish a little bit more, okay? Subscribe for more info. Follow me on Instagram, National ProStaff, Twitter, all that fun stuff.